how are you going to not hold assets when the money supply is just consistently and then parabolically going up? You have a mortgage crisis in 2009 because there wasn't enough regulation in TradFi. So they messed up. 2020, 2021, you have COVID, right? So you have a literal global pandemic, a once in 100-year thing. And then we printed an outrageous amount of money. I think it was like $3 trillion. It was like 40% of the entire money supply got printed during that period. So you have an extreme situation. They have to dial things back. So you get the historic rate hike cycle to try to undo the insane damage so you don't turn into Venezuela, so you don't turn into Argentina, you don't turn into Weimar Germany, right? But now here we are, we just came out of that. Well, we're doing $100 to $175 billion in money printing a month. And you have a president that looks at the stock market as his KPI and the crypto markets as his other KPI. So I just think things go up. I don't really see a reason for Bitcoin to blow up like a previous bull cycle, but I also don't see a reason for it to go down. But like, if you're just going to sell all your Bitcoin and you're like, I'm going to buy it back cheaper, I think that's going to go down as like some insanely horrible mistake that people think about for the rest of their lives. And I've seen it. Like one of our investors had 1,000 Bitcoins at one point, and it's just so hard to outperform the actual Bitcoin. He does not have 1,000 Bitcoins now.
Welcome back to Bitcoin Season 2. I've got Pio Vincenzo on the line today. Content creator, talks about Bitcoin. You may know him as co-founder of Bodoggos. We're going to rip about Bitcoin and markets around Bitcoin. Pio, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
So, Pio, you popped up on my radar like a couple years ago, I think. It was like bear market, early 23. And you were doing these like Bitcoin talks, Bitcoin spaces. And my head, I was like, who is this NFT guy? He's leading some of the best quality like Bitcoin conversations. I think you had like Nick Carter on there, and you had some fascinating, good content around it. And I kind of noticed is like you seem to be part of this like new wave of crypto content creators who have been talking and looking a lot more about Bitcoin. You talk a lot about culture-driven assets. Is it like a fair characterization that like you could be like a good example of like this new, more Bitcoin focused like crypto content creator? Am I like reading into this, or how do you frame like your outlook on just Bitcoin and the other assets?
Well, I just got into Bitcoin. I didn't get into crypto. So in 2020, that was when I got into Bitcoin, and it was just Bitcoin. Like crypto wasn't really on my radar. I just didn't really think about it. I was like really hyper focused on Bitcoin. And then when NFT stuff came out in late 2020, early 2021, I sort of got it, and I still get it. Like the concept of it works. That doesn't mean that you should go and spend $100,000 on NFTs that exist today, right? But the idea of tokenized digital art, it just went along with my Bitcoin understanding, right? It's like, they're not the same thing, right? If one is gold and one is going to have a $200 trillion market cap, but that, it's not the same thing as like Pokemon cards that are on a blockchain, based kind of structure. But yeah, they just both made sense to me. So I'm really just a Bitcoiner first. And I learned about Bitcoin, and I never got into crypto. I got into like NFTs. And to this day, I don't own any crypto stuff. I have Bitcoin. That's it. And then I'm an NFT project founder, so I own NFTs, obviously, but I'm just a Bitcoin guy. I do not like own Ethereum.
Yeah, which is interesting. I think that's like a good, I'll kind of double tap on this line of thought here, which is like, I'm noticing a lot of these, like, there's a lot of folks like really made their name in general crypto or like culture content. I call it like the thread guy effect. Like I've been watching like thread guy's streams, and he's like talking about Bitcoin more. And you wouldn't have seen that maybe 2 or 3 years ago. You've got your finger on the pulse of like this type of crowd, at least more than I. Are you seeing a lot of like that type of trader start to value Bitcoin more in their portfolio? I don't know. What's your assessment on this idea that I'm throwing at you?
Maybe a tiny bit. There's two things. There's people that are actually like quasi smart, and then there's people that are gambling addicts, and the gambling addicts will not get to Bitcoin. It's just not going to happen. Forget it. They'll get to it with 50x leverage on Hyperliquid. If someone tells them, hey, you should, open this long, 100x leverage on Hyperliquid on Bitcoin because it's going to go up. Yeah, they'll do a quick gamble on that and probably get their faces ripped off, right? But you're not going to convince like a gambling addict to own anything like that. That's not how it works. But someone like Thread Guy, who's been around now for like 4 years and is like, pretty smart. He's figuring out, taken a long time. I mean, I'm not trying to throw shade here, but it's taken a long time. But he's figuring out that all the value's in Bitcoin. So you're sort of watching that gradually happen. And he's also learning how to own things and like just own them. And I was having a conversation with someone about this last night that was basically like, I will not own anything. And I'm like, well, you should really own things if you want to not be poor, because, the money printer's going at $100 to $175 billion per month right now, which used to be, considered this like historic level of currency debasement. It's now a monthly occurrence. So people that don't own things will not have a choice. They're just going to become poor because the wealth gap is getting completely destroyed.
Yeah. And that presents a lot of interesting opportunities because Bitcoin obviously go up. That's the easy no-brain, turn your brain off, DCA, play, own Bitcoin. But like, there's a lot of other interesting things happening. There's MicroStrategy. There's the AI HPC, Bitcoin miners. We'll get into it. But like, okay. So for context, the listener, we're recording this early Monday morning. And if you're listening to this like 24, 48 hours later, anything can happen in the markets. But we just had a crazy historic crypto pullback, crash, if you will, Friday afternoon. Trump tweeted something about China, as usual, on Friday afternoon, sent markets tumbling, Bitcoin down 20K, not even crossing 100. But, I want to like jump into, I would say, rumor mill speculation a bit. I'll throw this at you. People, over the weekend, there's some, speculation that there's an insider, some Trump insider, sells some World Liberty Fi, shorts Bitcoin on Hyperliquid, knows ahead of time. But then we had on Sunday that, perhaps the same whale also be offsides by shorting Bitcoin, and Bitcoin went up. I don't know. Are you dialed into this narrative? I'm curious, like, what you think about this, this insider narrative, or like somebody who's like front running Trump tweets. What are your thoughts here?
I generally don't pay attention or care. And I learned, I always had like a sort of a hunch, but I think the rise of Polymarket and prediction market platforms, which is so fascinating, man. It's so cool that those are, crypto based, like blockchain based, right? That's like basically the killer breakout consumer app that we've actually, kind of seen manifest are those prediction markets. But when the election stuff was going on, and, news broke first on Polymarket, that showed me how insiders always will exist and will always take advantage. And obviously everybody knows about like Nancy Pelosi and politicians with the way that they've operated with insider trading. But it's kind of like Lord of the Rings. It's like, no one is qualified to have that kind of power where a half hour before everybody else that there's like going to be a ceasefire or something. And then all of a sudden you can just rip an infinite bet on Polymarket and make as much money as you want. And then once you've done it like 2 times, you become a complete addict and you're just doing it every single time. So I do think that completely exists. I did see that person, shorted it before the big crash, which is obviously like probably an insider thing. But then I saw that they were shorting it again yesterday. Yeah. That's interesting. Like Tom Lee said, markets rarely bottom on Fridays and it's more likely for it to bottom on Monday. But I don't know. I think with the exchange of information and the access to markets where I can trade on Robinhood, I can trade traditional equities from like, I think it's 7 a.m. to midnight with limit orders. I might be mistaken by a few hours on that, but it is certainly not 9:30 to 4. It is more than 9:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern. And then with Bitcoin and crypto, obviously you can just do that 24/7. So I think you're going to see an evolution of markets, and it's only going to continue. So maybe we do bottom on Fridays now, and you don't get that double dump.
That is interesting. I mean, you saw like over the past couple of years, as Bitcoin became more correlated to traditional markets, Bitcoin would be the first to crash if somebody somewhere in the world was, attacking another country, or, it'd be like Bitcoin was like the leading indicator of like, fear in the markets. It was kind of crazy to see like Bitcoin crash over the weekend and then be like, oh, this country is invading that country or something like that. It's kind of funny to like watch that. You brought up, the traditional markets, and this is not really my specialty, but I see you tweeting. I think maybe let's start with the big one, which is MicroStrategy. I heard you say on a podcast month or two ago, something like MicroStrategy might be the first $1 trillion company. What do you think about this line? Or do you still think that? Why do you think that? I mean, I've heard other like MicroStrategy bulls talk about this, but what is your like bull case for MicroStrategy or strategy now? I've got the cup.
There are several. Yeah, you got the cup. There are several $1 trillion companies. So I didn't say it would be the first $1 trillion company.
Oh, yeah.
Probably said that it was going to be a $10 trillion company. I don't know if it'll be the first one, but that was just based on the math. I think a lot of people aren't taking a good look at the math, and maybe it's that they're not as bullish on Bitcoin long term as I am, which I just don't understand at this point how people can watch the thing go from $1 to $125,000 and then still say, yeah, I don't know if it'll get to $1 million though. It's just so wild to me. Like, of course it's going to get to $1 million. At this point, that is such a foregone conclusion. You just have to think about time and you know, how time is on your side with an asset like Bitcoin. Why do I like MicroStrategy? I like MicroStrategy because they own like 600 something thousand Bitcoins and no other corporation will catch up. The only global entities that will be able to catch up are governments, like literally the United States government, the Chinese government, maybe some Middle Eastern governments, perhaps, right? Well, no, I mean, those two. Yeah, basically, those are the three, right? I don't even know if Russia can. It doesn't seem like Russia would be able to. I don't know. Maybe they can. Maybe I'm wrong. But the point is, it's major global superpowers that are super rich. And then right now, if Mag 7 companies, if Apple, Microsoft, Google, you know, Meta, if those companies rolled out of bed today and they said, we want to catch up to MicroStrategy, they could if they started right now and adopted the most hyper aggressive Bitcoin strategy that you've ever seen ever. And they're just not going to do that. You're not going to see Mark Zuckerberg say that we're going to buy 600,000 Bitcoins tomorrow. It's just not going to happen. Like, absolutely not. Right. So MicroStrategy will be the winner of companies that own a ton of Bitcoin. I don't want to call them Bitcoin treasury companies because what you saw a trend earlier this year where a bunch of people, you know, woke up one morning and they decided like, hey, we're going to try to, you know, play. It was actually very similar to like a crypto trend where all of a sudden everybody launches a new project. Only this was with publicly traded companies. Everybody adopted a Bitcoin strategy or a crypto strategy when it came to their treasury. And I think the result is that because obviously that pumped and then dumped, I mean, it started a little bit legit. You know, you have guys like Tom Lee doing it and stuff like that. But then you just saw like a bunch of BS happening there. But no surprise. I obviously didn't touch any of that. It's just not interesting. And then now what you're seeing is the baby has been thrown out with the bathwater, as markets do all the time. As they do all the time, just like how Facebook was thrown out, the baby was thrown out with the bathwater when the crypto market crashed in 2022 because Zuckerberg had said that they were, betting big on the metaverse and they rebranded to Meta, threw the baby out with the bathwater on a Mag 7 company. And obviously Facebook has been one of the best performers since then. Same thing's happening with MicroStrategy right now. So you're seeing the market not favor MicroStrategy as much. And you're seeing a shift in the market's perception where the market's trying to figure out the new structure for, you know, fundraising that strategy has implemented, which they've implemented this year, which is preferred equity instead of convertible debt. So a big shift there. A much chiller format to raising capital is the preferred. I mean, obviously it's debatable, but to me, it seems like the preferred equity is a little bit more chill. And if you ask Michael Saylor, he'll say that you can have more leverage with the preferred equity than you can with convertible debt. Closer to, I think he said 30% leverage. So you're just seeing some adjustments in the stock. For me, I own a bunch of MicroStrategy, almost 2,000 shares. The reason that I own that much is because if you go to a bank and you try to get a mortgage on a house with just Bitcoin, they acknowledge your Bitcoin. I don't care if you have 50 Bitcoins. They acknowledge it as $0. And so for me, it's good to have traditional assets and not just be 100% Bitcoin, because for a while I was basically 100% Bitcoin and crypto assets. And because I just love MicroStrategy, I do think it'll be a $10 trillion company. I think Michael Saylor's an animal.
Hey, Will here with Blockspace Media. Did you know that we have individual feeds for all our shows? If you're watching the Mining Pod, Bitcoin Season 2, or the Court Show, be sure to check out the individual feeds. You can find him on your podcast player of choice, whether that be Spotify, Apple, YouTube, etc. Just type in Blockspace Media and you'll find all our shows pop up, or just type in the individual show name like The Mining Pod or Bitcoin Season 2. Be sure to hit that subscribe and give us a 5-star rating so we can continue to bring you the best content in Bitcoin.
We've got this whole DAT trend. As you said, market's trying to figure this out. But one thing that seems to be, I've floated this idea before. Maybe this is not novel, but like maybe MicroStrategy is like the only survivor of all these DATs. Maybe there's like an ETH DAT or, that survives. But like, does MicroStrategy make it out okay? Is the DAT trade mostly empty and it's just the MicroStrategy trade? Is this, do you think this might be the right way to think about this?
The only other one of these companies that I own is Metaplanet, but Metaplanet was not a part of that trend. Metaplanet was effectively the second MicroStrategy, and Metaplanet's in a unique position because they are in the Japanese market, and in Japan, the regulations are so strict. I mean, if you've ever been to Japan, rules are rules. And so, they don't have easy access to Bitcoin. There's also layers. If you just study the Japanese stock market, the bond market, there's layers of reasons why it's interesting to, have a small position in Metaplanet. It's also been, baby has been thrown out with the bathwater. Metaplanet's actually, I think, a big reason why this trend started was because the market woke up to Metaplanet and it started pumping, and that showed grifters, basically, people that are interested in just extracting that, it's not just MicroStrategy that can pull this off. So everything is going to be okay with MicroStrategy. I also believe everything is going to be okay with Metaplanet. Everything will probably not be okay with the dozens of BS companies. Well, you also just can't do this with crypto tokens because time is against you with crypto tokens, whereas time is on your side with Bitcoin. And so maybe Tom Lee's ETH1 maybe works out because I like Tom Lee and I think he's smart and I think he's quasi legit, but he's also done stuff in the past that just didn't work out. Like, people have to realize that over like 8 or 9 years, a lot of these people just have a bunch of failed, ventures, and that's totally on the table. So I would not be like holding any of those things long term. It's really just MicroStrategy. And then the one unspoken thing is that, being a quote Bitcoin treasury company just means that you have Bitcoin on your balance sheet, which every single company, including the entire Mag 7, is going to do. Tesla's been doing that for 3-4 years at this point. People don't know, but Figma, company that IPO'd this year, after the IPO, they, filed and it came out in their filings that they have, I think it's something like $150 million of Bitcoin. No one talks about that. No one's like, it's a Bitcoin treasury company. It's just a normal company that happens to have a smart CFO that is like, we're going to have Bitcoin on this balance sheet because US dollars are getting debased. We're not going to own stock in another company because that's a whole different can of worms, but we'll take the best commodity available, today.
Yeah, I had Tim Kotzman of Bitcoin Treasuries on a month ago, and I was smart guy. And I was like, okay, what do you think the next meta for these might be? And he said, well, I would like to see growth companies, not like I'd like to see growth companies put Bitcoin on the balance sheet. Tesla's big. Figma's a great example. You couple the Bitcoin balance sheet with the hot IPO season. That's kind of like the whole point. Like, that's pretty much the Bitcoiner thesis, which is, you take a real company, not just some kind of like Bitcoin wrapper company, but you take a real company with a real business model, real revenues, add Bitcoin in the mix, and that's supercharged. Like, that's a pretty compelling idea. I like that thesis. Yeah.
I mean, it's simple. Yeah. It's just you're owning a good asset as a company. Nothing crazy about that. That's been happening forever.
So if we look at the companies with the biggest Bitcoin positions on the balance sheet, one of the kind of hilariously, the past 2 years, like Bitcoin miners have not really gotten the bid for being Bitcoin treasury companies, even though companies like Mara, I mean, I'm looking at it, it's the second largest Bitcoin treasury of any known company. Mara Holdings, 53,000 Bitcoin, number 2, right behind MicroStrategy. And yet, Mara is not really in this conversation of like hot Bitcoin treasury companies. Do you think let's talk a little bit about Bitcoin miners. Do you think the Bitcoin miners treasury companies play works? Do you think it looks a little bit different? Let's talk about Bitcoin miners. What are your thoughts?
I think it just depends on how good their business is. The reason that the market did not recognize them is because, again, like Mr. Market is manic depressive. The market is not always right. I know people say like markets are efficient, this, that, and the other thing. Not when there's like trends. They're not very efficient. In fact, they pump trends super high. Look at the SPAC trend of 2021. I find it hard to believe for you to say that, like, you know, for anybody to say that markets are always efficient when you've seen look at the NFT market in 2021 and 2022. Was that an efficient market? Should Bored Ape Yacht Club pictures have been $500,000? I don't.
There's a picture for some people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So with companies like Bitcoin miners, if you go ask your average TradFi person, because Bitcoin miners have been around for a long time. So it's not like if you're going to like, if you ask someone about a prediction markets company, like a normal person, they probably don't have a whole book, written in their mind on, their commentary on a prediction market, because that's a new thing. But Bitcoin miners have been around for a long time. They've been around for, pretty much as long as Bitcoin, right? So I actually talked to a friend of mine that works in TradFi about Bitcoin mining companies, because I brought up IREN and Cypher, and I brought up the deals that Nebius and TeraWolf, just got across the line. And he, like, if you ask him about a Bitcoin miner, he's just going to say, well, isn't it too expensive at this point? Like, the cost of the energy is more than the cost of the Bitcoin, and it's just a really hard company to make work, which, by the way, there's some like truth to what he's saying. You would know better than me, right?
Yeah.
But the point is, the common reputation of United States-based Bitcoin mining companies, I think, from TradFi people, is that they aren't the best companies to invest in. And really, over the past 2 years, they didn't catch fire until 4 months ago. They grind it up. They grind it up slowly, but there were also really like heinous moments of volatility where they, they corrected by 50% in some cases, right? So it was a tough hold over multiple years, especially when you're watching MicroStrategy pop off and you're watching Bitcoin itself pop off. But then now all of a sudden the thesis is fully manifested, and you have IREN at $65, Cypher at whatever it is, $27 or $17, I think. It's been a run.
Yeah, both. Yeah, IREN and Cypher. We were in Dallas this past week for the North American Blockchain Summit. It's a big energy and Bitcoin mining conference. Interviewed the CEO of Cypher, Tyler Page, talked to Jason Les of Riot, talked to other large private, mining companies dealing with hyperscalers. Like, it is a bull market. And it didn't seem like people really caught on to the miner trade until about a month ago. Like, as you said, been grinding up. You could tell you had some people like Mike Alfred make some, yeah. Mike was, we had Mike on our Mining Pod, our sister podcast last month. Obviously, great spicy takes as always.
Yeah.
I want to double tap on IREN and Cypher, because I really enjoyed chatting with Tyler Page. He's a really sharp guy. Sometimes it can like be difficult to separate like stock ticker from the actual business. Mm-hmm. And, talking to like the Cypher guys, I was like, oh, you guys are adults. You guys aren't just like trying to pump some meme stock. You've got real massive like power pipelines. You're doing these big plans for these like partnered hyperscalers. Pio, what are your thoughts? Are we at the top, or do these things like, is this just the market getting started on these assets?
It has to be just getting started. I want to, lay out the caveat. I'm not going to offer any insight that you could not get from Mike Alfred times 100. Do you know what I mean? So, this is not, I am out of my depth with this. I look to much smarter people like him and others when it comes to this. My thoughts on the miners, is that these businesses are insane. Like, better than me, because you've tried to do it or you have done it.
I've still got my own minds, but like, I'm not, it's a difficult business. So I I respect the hustle. Yeah.
Insane business. These companies are owning the land. They're owning, all of the equipment, the buildings, everything, right? So there's a lot going on here on why these businesses absolutely kick ass just from a traditional business perspective. The market's waking up to them now, which is giving them even more, power, because, they're able to kind of raise more capital for their initiatives. It's incredible stuff. My thoughts on it, maybe some insight that I can share that you might not get from every guest is, so if you listen to Lynn Alden, well, I'm a big fan of Lynn Alden, right? Like, Lynn Alden's been not only on the economics side, but also on the money side. She has a book called Broken Money, for example, right? If you read that book, she kind of goes through the history of money and how we got to where we're at now. And if you're on a hard money standard, which for significant portions of human history, humans were on a hard money standard of some sort, like a gold standard, for example, then investing is actually like a niche thing. It's not something that everybody has to do, because it's very hard to outperform the money itself. So if you plug Bitcoin in as our hard money today, and you hear guys say Bitcoin's the hurdle rate, that's what you hear like the MSTR True North guys say. That's what you hear Michael Saylor say now. Bitcoin is the hurdle rate, meaning that Bitcoin is the baseline rate that you have to outperform for it to be worth it for you to do anything besides just hold Bitcoin, right? And so when you think about it like that, investing is really hard because you got to outperform Bitcoin. You got to outperform your hard money. So I'm an investor. I'm an investment guy. I've been doing this now almost full time for like 4 years, right? So I'm an investor. Like for better or for worse, I'm doing it, right? When I look at the market right now, there's only for me like three things that are going to outperform Bitcoin. Literally MicroStrategy, because it has outperformed Bitcoin forever. I know it hasn't outperformed it for 6 months, and everyone's like, pointing to that single metric, even though everybody knows in investing, you have to have long time frames for analysis. So MicroStrategy, because it's levered Bitcoin, Saylor can accumulate more Bitcoin than you can. So in theory, holding MicroStrategy is going to outperform Bitcoin. It's the Bitcoin nuclear reactor. What's worth more money, Standard Oil or the oil itself? Standard Oil was, right? So, okay. Then moving on to Bitcoin miners, I think these things outperform Bitcoin because these businesses are insane. And the businesses that they've built for Bitcoin happen to have enough juice, enough power, enough, applicability that AI companies need them. Now that's just wild. That's a gold mine right there. That's incredible. So I can't wait to see where these things go. That's actually the strongest sector to me for sure, is like these mining companies being repositioned for AI. Can't wait to see where it goes. These could be enormous stocks. Like IREN could be, people call for it to be like a $900 stock. It's crazy. It's actually nuts. Can't wait to see where they're at in like 8 years. It's really something. This is not BS. This is a real company that owns everything in their business. So cool. And then the last thing for me is, and this is sort of my pet stock that I think is super cool, is Open Door Technologies. That was like a trendy one. It was trendy, but now it's consolidating. So a lot of people are starting to, leave, which is good. And it's what you want. You don't want the gambling addicts in your stock. You want them to just get out. And it's just because it's a tech company that has the potential to be another tech giant similar to Robinhood now is doing quite well. I like looking at it as a Robinhood comp, and it's kind of the last nut, or one of the last nuts that hasn't been cracked by technology, which is housing. So that's the other area that I'm looking at. There's not really other companies. My friend was like texting me about like a electric helicopter company. I was like, what are you talking about, man? Like, do not send me this. I don't know what you're talking about.
You're not going to buy an electric helicopter. People want to buy houses. So
yes, exactly.
We're already trying to buy houses. So you had a really interesting Open Door interview the other day. I thought that was fantastic. I recommend everybody go listen to that. You brought up prediction markets as well. That's hot this week. That's crazy. I mean, these things have been kind of like sidelined into like just weird crypto people for a while. Mm-hmm. Obviously, Polymarket heats up during the election. You talked about how, maybe some Polymarket insider, but like, I've personally been bullish on prediction markets for a long time. I feel like this actually goes into like old school, like, cypherpunk theory, because this was the stuff that a lot of the, futurists back in the day during early Bitcoin days would talk about. Well, markets for everything. That's kind of it's crazy to see it happen. Now we're seeing Kalshi get valued. They raised several $100 million. Polymarket, integrating with the New York Stock Exchange. What's going on with prediction markets, PO? Where are they headed? Like, are we, again, it's a tired question, but are we just getting started with prediction markets?
Yeah. So I think the valuations were like $8 billion for Polymarket and $5 billion for Kalshi. So these are both huge companies now. I think that we're obviously just getting started. For the news, it's so interesting for the news, like that ceasefire that broke on Polymarket first. It's just how humans work. There's nothing you can do about it. Humans are going to insider trade. It's just how we work, and it's better to accept it and not think that humans are qualified to hold the ring in Lord of the Rings, right? You can't hold the ring like that. Tolkien or whoever wrote Lord of the Rings tried to tell us that, right? And that's just what it is. And it's super cool to see it based on blockchain. Obviously, it makes perfect sense that it would be based on blockchain, 100%. I think Polymarket will be a huge company. Maybe Kalshi will too. I don't know. But I know Polymarket will be a huge company. And I think that yeah, you're just going to see these things get involved with more and more sectors. You're seeing it involved with like sports betting. You're seeing it involved with news. You're seeing it involved with culture. Like, will Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift like have a baby this year? Like stuff like that. People want to bet on stuff. You know, who's going to win the Academy Award for Best Actor? It's just interesting to have markets for everything. It was inevitable. The cypherpunks called it a long time ago. Like you said, futurists called it. So let's see what the futurists call next.
Let's wrap this conversation up with some bull fuel. You, I believe, retweeted or maybe brought up Anthony Pompliano, one of my favorite bull posters over the past decade. He said, Paul Tudor Jones, this was last week, Paul Tudor Jones on CNBC right now predicting a blow-off top in stock market performance, even more explosive than 1999, higher. We haven't really seen a true like pop off in like a Bitcoin led crypto run. It's kind of been this like grind up with like little mini narratives spinning out underneath. This is a cycle question. Is the 4-year cycle broken? Do we see these blow off tops? Is Paul Tudor Jones directionally right? What are your thoughts?
You know, I think I have to think that the cycle doesn't exist anymore in the same way. It just like, I feel like being obsessed with the idea that it's exactly the same as it always was would be strange. And I think when you look at the previous cycles, where we are now in terms of Bitcoin acceptance by, you know, the government, by traditional finance, by people in general, we're just way further along. So like 2017 and before, you just have to throw that out, right? Because it's like, it wasn't even on my radar. I had no clue what was going on. It was essentially something that people considered a gamble. Then 2020, 2021, when I got in, you know, that first rip, it was after Michael Saylor started buying, and that's definitely a factor, right? Because that was like a big, you know, kind of corporate finance validation for Bitcoin. But it's still like it was really, you know, I was having conversations with friends and they were trying to poke holes, like basic holes in Bitcoin, like they knew nothing, and then it just rips to $50,000 in like a month and a half, and it's like you still want to, you know, have that position. Then they started learning about it. We had the kind of pullback. My thoughts are, I don't know if there's going to be a blow off top. I don't know. Like Paul Tudor Jones, I think, is speaking actually more from the stock market perspective. He's a Bitcoin guy, but he's looking at it from a stock market perspective. The way that I look at it is like this. I'm now thinking about what things would have looked like if the other candidate, like not Trump, had won. I think it would have been worse for, quote, crypto, but the Bitcoin ETF was already around. The Bitcoin ETF happened during Joe Biden's presidency. So like Bitcoin was going to happen. I think it would have been a pain in the ass to be a crypto entrepreneur. But so all you get really from Trump in terms of a difference is that you get a friendlier crypto environment, which is great. That's awesome. That's really super cool, right? But either way, we were going to be printing a ton of money. And when you look at the last, call it 15 years, what do you have? You have bull market only pretty much because of money printing, because how are you going to not hold assets when the money supply is just consistently and then parabolically going up? You have a mortgage crisis in 2009 because there wasn't enough regulation in TradFi. So they messed up. That was bad. They lent out money. You can't do that. Even if you're printing money, you can't do that. That's a messed up structure. It doesn't work, right? So you have that. So you have a bear market there. That's a bad one. If you go 25 years back, before that, the previous one was the dot-com bust, which is the market being irrational and thinking pets.com should be worth a ton of money when no one buys things online yet, right? So it's just too early. Then you have 2020, 2021, you have COVID, right? So you have a literal global pandemic, a once in 100-year thing, whether it's a naturally occurring thing, whether it's in a lab, whether it was intentional, who knows, who cares? It happened, right? We shut down the economy literally. And then we printed an outrageous amount of money. I think it was like $3 trillion. It was like 40% of the entire money supply got printed during that period. So you have an extreme situation. So then they have to dial things back. So you get the historic rate hike cycle, right? Like just crazy aggressive rate hike cycle to try to undo the insane damage. So you don't turn into Venezuela. So you don't turn into Argentina. You don't turn into Weimar Germany, right? But now here we are. We just came out of that. And now we're starting our historic rate cut cycle. It's chiller in the sense that we're not going to shut the economy down and then pump $3 trillion. But we're doing $100 to $175 billion of money printing a month. And you have a president that looks at the stock market as his, his KPI and the crypto markets as his other KPI. So I just think things go up. I think AI is a huge thing. And I think I don't really see a reason for Bitcoin to blow up, like, to go up in an insane way like a previous bull cycle. But I also don't see a reason for it to go down in an insane way, right? And I think you're going to see, and I also have, this is my last thing because I know I'm rambling, last point on this. I have a belief that crypto Twitter has to always lose. That's I have that belief. Crypto Twitter must lose, because if crypto Twitter doesn't lose, then the Hamptons is just owned by crypto guys. And that's not the case, right? When you go to the Hamptons, it's dentists, it's doctors, it's bankers, it's, all these tech people. The crypto guys don't own the Hamptons. And so I think the gamblers have to lose. And I think everyone's going to be like, take profits, like on Bitcoin. And you should take profits on random BS that's going to go to zero. But like, if you're just going to sell all your Bitcoin and you're like, I'm going to buy it back cheaper, I think that's going to go down as like some insanely horrible mistake that people think about for the rest of their lives. And I've seen it. Like, one of our investors had 1,000 Bitcoins at one point, and he invested into his companies. And it's just so hard to outperform the actual Bitcoin. He does not have 1,000 Bitcoins now, right? So I think when you look at all those things, the current administration, the money printing situation, AI, and that crypto Twitter must lose, I don't really see a world where, the 4-year cycle looks the same. I'm going to be talking to Plan C, if you know who that is.
Yeah.
In a few weeks. I'm really excited about that conversation. I want to see what he thinks, because I feel like he's he's like just obsessed with that. Like, that's what he's like looking at, so we'll see.
Yeah, I actually brought up, I think, his chart a couple months ago. He called like the institutional bid or something. Mm-hmm. I kind of share that view. That makes sense to me. It's the one that would catch most people off sides and create the most pain on crypto Twitter, which again, also a heuristic of mine to see what's going to happen. Pio, thank you so much for coming, Bitcoin Tuesday. I really appreciate this rip. And I'll see you at $1 million Bitcoin sometime in the future. We'll run it back when Bitcoin crosses over 1 million.
Sounds great.